Today, Iran has struck the United Kingdom for the first time and has officially threatened to attack those countries that support the American sanctions announced by Donald Trump as part of the new economic phase of the war. Meanwhile, the American president himself has, for the second time this week, declared the Strait of Hormuz to be US territory. Today, it became known that hackers linked to the Iranian regime, as a result of an unprecedented cyber attack, shut down a power plant in the United Kingdom for as long as 4 days. And this was a sign that things could only get worse, because during the same period the Iranians attacked at least 12 critical infrastructure facilities in the United States of America. Meanwhile, the United Arab Emirates is already building special fortifications around fuel storage tanks to protect them from Iranian drone strikes. So nothing in the region right now looks like preparation for peace. It's more like preparation for another escalation. Although it's also worth noting that there is an open split within the Iranian regime itself. It became public because the pro-war faction is saying that they need to keep fighting and escalate the war. Today, the president of Iran stated for the first time that we urgently need to sign a peace agreement, otherwise the country will simply collapse. My name is Alexey Pichi, let's discuss this topic together. But before we start, please subscribe to the channel, like this episode and leave any comment you want. So Iran is trying in every possible way to get out of the war, but on victorious terms. But that doesn't mean Tehran is ready to stop the fighting. The new head of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, Mohsen Rezai, a hardliner, threatened Tehran's neighbors with consequences if they join the new US campaign aimed at undermining the Iranian economy. He also accused the United States of worsening global nuclear instability because of the months-long war. According to Rezai, Iran will target oil transportation routes from the Persian Gulf, alternative to the Strait of Hormuz, if neighboring countries join the US economic war against Iran. Tehran will consider these countries its enemies. Here, we are primarily talking about the Bab el-Mandeb Strait in the Red Sea, as well as the fact that the US has managed to partially restore oil supplies from the Persian Gulf. In particular, it is reported that they have already reached about half the volume that existed before the war. And how does this happen? At night, under the escort of American military forces, tankers enter and exit through the Strait of Hormuz along the Omani coast. Rezai noted that negotiations are ongoing with Oman itself, which is located on the other side of the strait, regarding the management of this waterway. Iran established control over the Strait of Hormuz, which is considered an international waterway, shortly after the US and Israeli attack on February 28. Tehran wants to introduce fees for ships passing through this strait. And now, Rezai has promised to make changes in Iranian diplomacy as well, and to use new opportunities, as he put it, in the next war. In other words, he doesn't want to stop. He warned the US about the inadvisability of sending additional military personnel to the region and stated that the US has worsened nuclear instability, since other countries see that participation in international monitoring activities, as Iran did, does not guarantee protection from attack. Well, the hint here is that, we did let IAEA inspectors in. They came, checked, supposedly confirmed that we weren't making a nuclear bomb, but we were attacked anyway. Accordingly, next time other countries will think about whether it's worth letting in any inspectors if it doesn't lead to anything anyway. I would like to note that Iran's supreme leader appointed Rezai as the head of the Supreme National Security Council just this month as part of a series of personal appointments, which indicate the tough political and military stance of Tehran. Meanwhile, diplomats from Egypt and Iran continue to discuss the possibility of Tehran and Washington returning to the negotiating table. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi informed Egyptian Foreign Minister Badr Abdel Ati about, quote, Iran's view on the current event during the negotiations and the related challenges. So, in other words, Araghchi is hinting that they wouldn't mind returning to the negotiations. Arakchi also had a phone conversation with Pakistan's army chief, Asim Munir, and essentially asked him to somehow get through to Trump to get him back to the negotiations. Last week, let me remind you, US President Donald Trump promised to increase pressure on Iran with unprecedented sanctions aimed at economically isolating Tehran. Washington plans to announce the details of the new sanctions on Monday, August 24. And the US Treasury has already announced that these will be some of the largest sanctions in history, which will definitely devastate the Iranian economy. However, analysts remind us that Iran has been living under sanctions for many years, even without resistance from other countries. There are doubts about whether it is even possible to successfully intensify the US campaign of economic pressure. In addition, analysts also warn that it is unclear whether the United States will be able to completely sever Iran's trade ties with neighboring countries, which have existed for many generations due to Iran's geographic proximity. Despite the Treasury Department, in these countries it will depend on the details of US policy and the level of its implementation. At the moment, these are just general public threats, but they are unlikely to yield any results. Real action is needed against a foreign bank there or a foreign company that work with Iranians, so that third countries can actually see and understand exactly what the Trump administration is ready to target. Here, analysts say that it would be good, for example, to impose sanctions against one oil refinery in China, which continues to process specifically Iranian oil, and against just one Chinese bank, which helps process payments for that very oil. And then it will become clear that it's better not to play around, it's really better to stop cooperating with Iran. For now, these are just threats, but by the way, there isn't a unified position within Iran itself either. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian publicly stated that Iran cannot continue the war forever, and therefore it is necessary to return to negotiations. During two speeches in Tehran this Sunday, Pezeshkian defended the Memorandum of Understanding, which was reached by Iran and the United States in June, despite the alleged concerns of Iran's supreme leader Mojdeh Khamenei, who, on the contrary, well, if he is indeed alive and capable, states that it's not worth it. He even says there's no point in returning to this idea. But Pezeshkian made the following statement on Sunday, quote, "At some point, it will be necessary to make a decision that will save the country from a state of neither war nor peace. Everyone who was directly involved in the negotiations believes that the memorandum is the best way forward. The implementation of this memorandum will allow us to solve the problems logically and with dignity." The president of Iran has repeatedly warned about the economic and social consequences of the conflict with the United States, which has sometimes led to disagreements with the more radical members of the country's leadership. Another quote from Pezeshkian: "We must be on the side of the people. If we cannot serve them and convince them that we all belong to one land and one country, then even with the greatest military power, we will be defeated." Moreover, there's another interesting point that has emerged, which indicates a real split, because a similar position, a position like Pezeshkian's, was also supported by Ayatollah Sayyed Hassan Khamenei. He is the grandson of Ruhollah Khamenei, the founder of the Islamic Republic of Iran. He stated, and I quote, "Sometimes a wise compromise can bring more benefit than hundreds of wars." And commentators are noting the growing debate among the leadership about how to resolve the conflict with the United States. Some suggest that Iran should negotiate from a position of strength before the economic crisis worsens even further. Well, and the hardliners and the security apparatus continue to reject any dialogue altogether. And now the radical wing has already launched a new offensive. In particular, hackers linked to the Iranian regime managed to halt the operation of a power plant in the United Kingdom for 4 days as a result of an unprecedented cyber attack. According to The Telegraph, this is the first known case in which Iranian cyber operatives managed to shut down such a facility in the United Kingdom, and probably this is their most successful attack of this kind. British officials, for security reasons, refused to name which specific power plant was shut down. However, it is known that the facility was out of operation for 4 days, while specialists were trying to restore operations. It is reported that the facility was relatively small, so its temporary shutdown did not affect the overall energy supply or electricity production in the United Kingdom. But nevertheless, this is a worrying sign. Iran too can disable power plants using cyber attacks. Moreover, according to the Telegraph, the incident occurred simultaneously with a series of cyber attacks on water supply facilities in 12 US states in July. In the US, attackers targeted dozens of water treatment facilities, which led to flooding, a drop in pressure in water supply networks, and forced local authorities to recommend that residents boil water before drinking it. The first breaches were recorded in Minnesota on July 26, after which similar incidents occurred in Michigan, Georgia, South Dakota, and New Jersey. Later, the US government confirmed that the attack originated from Tehran. So, as you can see, the war is simply moving into a new phase now. The Americans want to apply economic pressure, and the Iranians apparently not only want to intimidate their neighbors, but also to launch large-scale cyber attacks. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye everyone!